Hello, my name is Tracy Martin, and I am a PhD candidate at Liberty University. This presentation is an overview of the history and preservation efforts at the old Idaho Penitentiary. Idaho was established as a U.S. territory on March 4, 1863, originally encompassing all of present-day Idaho, Montana, and most of Wyoming. In 1864, the creation of the Montana Territory significantly reduced Idaho's size. Just 4 years later, in 1868, Congress set the boundaries for the new Wyoming Territory, which encompassed all of now Yellowstone National Park and the Grand Teton Mountains, further diminishing the land area of the Idaho Territory. This hand-hewn prison was originally constructed above Elk Creek, just north of Idaho City. It featured 14 cells and incorporated handmade nails, chains, door lifts, and window bars, all designed to prevent escape. The crude structure served as a territorial prison until the 1870s. Eventually, placer mining undermined the ground beneath the original site, causing this building to collapse into Elk Creek. Since then, it has been relocated at least 4 times. Its most recent move was carried out by the sons and daughters of Idaho pioneers, who are honored with a monument standing in front of the jail. Between 1865 and 1870, a total of 106 criminals passed through the gates of this prison. 17 of them escaped and were never recaptured. A total of 26 were either discharged or pardoned, leaving an average of just 10 inmates per year. These prisoners were overseen by only 2 jailers, who alternated between 12-hour shifts and were rarely on duty at the same time. This minimal staffing led to growing concern among officials and the public, prompting calls for cost-cutting measures and improved security. Today, this historic site is maintained by the Idaho City Historical Foundation, a nonprofit organization committed to preserving, restoring, and sharing the history and heritage of Boise Basin and the state of Idaho. Eventually, a new prison site was selected on Warm Springs Avenue east of Boise. In 1870, the federal government began official construction of the more permanent facility, using inmate labor to help build the sandstone structure. Just 2 years later, in 1872, the doors of the imposing territorial penitentiary in Boise officially opened. The photo on the right is the only known image of the completed territorial cell house before it was remodeled into the chapel. The building contained 3 tiers of cells and was fitted with a tin roof. However, in 1909, it was declared unsanitary and poorly ventilated. By 1920, the building was condemned for habitation by the state, but remained in use as the prison's chapel. This is what the territorial cell house looks like today. Beginning on March 7, 1973, a destructive riot took place. During the incident, prisoners burned the chapel and dining hall to the ground. Today, visitors cannot enter this building due to safety concerns, but the interior can be viewed through the Iron Gate. The location offers both guided and self-guided tours. What is so interesting about the old Idaho Penitentiary is it operated for over a century, 101 years in fact. Prison took 2 years to complete and opened in 1872. The first execution was carried out just 6 years later, and in 1891 the facility was handed over to the new state of Idaho. The last execution at the prison occurred in 1957. The prison itself was built in the Second Empire architectural style, featuring guard turrets and thick walls that gave the appearance of a castle or fortress. The design was deliberately intended to create a somber, imposing atmosphere considered fitting for housing prisoners. During the time the prison was in operation, it held more than 13,000 inmates. Some were women and some were children. The old site is situated east of downtown Boise between the city center and the Boise foothills. It is now a historic site and museum that is open daily to the public. 10 executions took place at the old Idaho Penitentiary during its 101 years of operation. The methods and locations for hangings varied over the decades. From 1901 to 1926, 6 inmates were hanged in the prison's Rose Garden. In 1951, near Yard 2 Gate, the state's only double execution took place. And then in 1957, in the gallows room, final execution of the prison was moved indoors. Raymond Allen Snowden was the last person to be hanged at the penitentiary. His execution was botched. It took 15 minutes for him to die of strangulation. Buildings at the old Idaho Penitentiary were added throughout the 101 years of operation, from the 1870s until its closure in 1973. Most of the structures were built by inmate labor who quarried sandstone from nearby Table Rock. Later, concrete was used as the primary building material. The main structures include the 1872 original territorial penitentiary building, which was completed. In 1893 to 94, administrative building and wall was completed. A year later, false front buildings were completed. In 1899, the Cell House 2, also known as the New Cell House, and it was built to alleviate overcrowding of the first building. It also had three tiers of steel cells. In 1899 to 1911, cell houses 3 and 4 are 2 identical cell blocks, each with 3 tiers of steel cells, similar to the appearance of the 1889 block. The women's ward was built in 1913. A separate building was added to house female inmates with a focus on domestic skills training. Cooler was built in the 1920s, and this building was constructed for solitary confinement, but was frequently overcrowded with 4 to 6 men per cell. Siberia, built in 1926, the second solitary confinement unit, was added, with 12 3-foot by 8-foot cells designed, one for each inmate. In 1952, Cell House 4 was the largest and most modern cell house when it was built. Cell House 5 was built in 1954, and it was the last cell house to be built. This was a maximum security unit for the most violent offenders, and it included a built-in gallows and death row on the second floor. With riots, deteriorating facilities, and limited space for expansion, ultimately led to the construction of a new correctional facility in 1972. Located near Kuna, Idaho, the new prison gradually became the home to the inmates, as transfers from the old site took place over time. In 1974, the recently renamed Old Idaho Penitentiary was added to the National Register of Historic Places. Since then, it has been preserved and reinterpreted through multi-year initiatives led by the Idaho State Historical Society. Today, the site operates as a museum under the Society's management. Locally known as the Old Pen, it is not only a place of history, but also of legend. Many Boise residents believe it is haunted by the spirits of former guards and the executed inmates. There have been many preservation and restoration efforts over the years. After the prison's closure, the state initially planned to demolish this site. However, in 1974, the State Historical Society successfully secured approval to preserve the site and convert it to a public museum. In the early years of preservation, efforts were centered on restoring the original buildings, including replacing roofs destroyed by the inmate riots. Many of the structures, Romanesque in style, were built from locally quarried sandstone, much of it cut and laid by inmates. Another thing the Idaho State Historical Society has done has documented the architectural history. It has cataloged the site's distinctive architectural features, including the cell blocks, the warden's residence, pictured here at the bottom center, and the women's ward. The detailed documentation serves as a reference for ongoing maintenance and preservation. And finally, securing federal support. The site has received funding to aid in the restoration programs, including grants from programs like Save America's Treasures, which help sustain long-term efforts. In 2021, with a grant from the National Endowment of the Humanities, the Idaho State Historical Society launched a multi-year interpretive and experience master plan to rethink how the prison's history is shared with the public. The plan aims to deepen historical understanding by conducting new research that presents a more comprehensive and nuanced view of Idaho's correctional history, examining themes of crime, punishment, and the shifting social values over time. Community engagement is the key focus of this project, including a diverse advisory team made up of scholars, experts and former correctional professionals, and local stakeholders. This collaborative approach encourages meaningful conversations about the complex legacy of the penal system. Additionally, the master plan will guide the creation of new exhibits and programs that move beyond the prison's physical structures to highlight the stories of those who lived and worked within the walls. Public engagement is a major component of the master plan. The prison's preservation is supported not only by historic significance, but also by its role as an active cultural site, hosting a variety of events that attract visitors and generate revenue for ongoing maintenance. Visitors can take guided tours through the historic cell blocks, gallows, and other original buildings. The site offers unique programs such as Sleepless in Stripes, an overnight experience, and Fright Nights, an annual Halloween event. The J. Curtis Earl Memorial Exhibit features a collection of weapons and is an important part of the site's educational offerings and enriches the visitors' experiences. Recently, the Idaho State Historical Society has prioritized historical reexamination as part of its interpretive planning efforts. To enrich the narrative shared with the public, the Society has undertaken new research initiatives. One such effort is a photo crowdsourcing project aimed at collecting historical images of the prison to support this research. Another endeavor is the digital series Behind Gray Walls, a podcast launched in 2021 that shares the personal stories of individual inmates using historical research to bring a human dimension to the penitentiary's history. Over the years, several notable publications have explored the history of the old Idaho Penitentiary. Prisoner 88 is a fictional story rooted in fact, recounting the tale of James Oscar Baker, who was sentenced for manslaughter at just 10 years old in 1885. Upon entering the prison, he became the youngest inmate in the facility's history, serving less than a year. And since 1905, the Idaho law required that juveniles be separated from adults in correctional facilities. However, juvenile cases continue to be tried in adult courts for many decades, and historical records show that young offenders were sometimes placed in state penitentiaries. Behind Gray Walls, written by former inmate Patrick Charles Murphy and published in 1920, was set in the institution and followed the lives of both the inmates and staff. Inmates of the Idaho Penitentiary is a directory and catalog of inmate files transferred from the Idaho Department of Corrections to the Idaho State Historical Society's Public Archives and Research Library. This was published in 1995 and is very useful for historical researchers. Thank you for watching my video presentation. And if you find yourself in Idaho, please take the time to visit the old Idaho State Pen.